Okay, now Powder Mills Pottery is called Powder Mills Pottery because it's on the site of an old gunpowder factory, Victorian gunpowder factory. And the pottery is in part of the accommodation block that was, and down in the little valley nearby is the magical place, which is now the ruins of that actual factory. This little clapper bridge here is part of the Lichway, which is, I think, medieval Lichways, where they carried their dead off the moor to church ground at Lidford. The Lichway doesn't actually pass over that little bridge anymore because the National Park Authority has moved the ancient Lichway. So I've brought you down here because this is where I gather one of the rocks I use for a glaze, particularly from this wonderful little stream here that you can hear burbling away. This is the Cherry Brook, which the Lichway used to go over. Magical. Now this watercourse, like all the watercourses on Dartmoor, carries with it a gravel, and if you look at the river bed you will see a sort of an orangey gravel all over it, and this is eroded granite, and it's been carried down from the hills up there, from those tors. And locally this gravel is called Growan, and I collect this as one of the rocks I use a glaze from. So here's a bucket of Cherry Brook river gravel that I have collected, and I'm going to show you how I turn that into a suitable state to make a glaze with. And it involves this little thing, which is a porcelain jar, and as you can see, about a third full of porcelain balls, porcelain very hard, and they're going to act like little hammers. So what I'm going to do is, to add to the balls in there, I'm going to fill up another third of the jar with the river gravel that's been collected from the bottom of the Cherry Brook. And it's important I don't overfill it, because otherwise it won't grind properly. Okay, just get the bits off. Then I'm going to add water to fill up the jar, fill up all the spaces, and leave about a quarter of the jar to be air. So I'm just going to do that. Need two hands, so bear with me. There you go. So I've added the water. I've cleaned off the top because I now need to put the lid on and make it watertight. So on goes a washer, and on goes the lid, which is screwed down, with a bar, like that. And I've got to make this seal here watertight because this jar is going to be on its side and I don't want the contents leaking out. Now I'm going to take this jar to the ball mill and show you how that works. Okay, so here's the little jar mill, which is very simple apparently, but I certainly couldn't build one. Little electric motor which drives one of these bars to spin, and there's a second bar, and as you can probably see, that bar can be moved depending how big your jar is. And if I add a jar, here's the jar that I made earlier, the jar helps this one spin and the jar rotates. And what happens is all of those little white porcelain balls are now falling as it spins onto the gravel and beginning to bash it up. There is a science to this. You have to have the right speed for the size of your jar for the balls to fall and not just spin around with centrifugal force. So it's more complicated than it looks. But that's going to sit there for 8 hours and grind down the contents of that river gravel. Okay, so after 8 hours of spinning, anything that I am going to be able to grind down will have ground down. There's some stuff that I just can't unless I do extra processing. I'm not going to be able to ball mill quartz, for example, and there will be quartz crystals in that gravel because there's quartz in granite. So after 8 hours, that's my optimum. I use what I've got. And what I then do is I take this little lid off, like so. And I'm going to empty out those contents into a sieve over a bucket. You'd be surprised to know, it involves more sieving. Okay. There you go, so that's the contents of the jar. Gone into the little sieve, and you can see the white ball mill balls and the coarse gravel that I can't do much with. I'm going to wash that through with some water and wash through the sieve as much of the fine stuff as I can. You can see that water there is holding fine gravel. So underneath you get water and fine gravel, which when I dry back and evaporate all the water, you'll be left with a very fine gravel powder, and that's what we're after for our rock material for this glaze. So I'm just going to carry on washing this through, get all the good stuff out, and then I'm going to refill the jar mills and do it all over again. Okay, so river gravel, the fine stuff in water. Just going to pour it into here. There you go. And then that will go into the hot box overnight to evaporate the water. This is what the ground down river gravel looks like once it's dried back. It's a very fine powder. And as you can see, I don't get a massive yield from the ball mills. I've got to fill that bucket, so I'll be here for some time yet. But that's how I prepare a rock for a glaze.